Chapter 1. The Great Sardini. Strictly speaking, the Great Sardini was the most powerful magician on earth for the past 100 years. Mind you, this was not common knowledge to everyone. For many people did not bother themselves with things such as magic because, for the most part, they don't believe in them. Yet, as it is with all real things that are unseen, magic continues to exist, regardless of whether people believe in it or not. I would also wager that if you had seen all the things that the Great Sardini had in his travels, you would not doubt that magic existed, and look much less foolish to those who know it well. Now, as you may have guessed by his title, the Great Sardini was a performance magician. But what you may not have guessed, what none of his rivals had guessed, was that his magic was real. For you see, when the Great Sardini was just a little Sardini, he had inherited a good deal of money, due to some unfortunate circumstances. These circumstances transpired just around his 14th birthday, a time when many people, Sardini included, are just deciding what they want to do with their lives. Often, though, our parents are there to gently guide us away from our original plans, because most of them are not very grounded in reality and sometimes a bit foolish. However, poor Sardini, finding himself newly orphaned, had no such guidance, nor financial limitations, and because he still strongly believed in magic of all kinds, he sought to travel the world to become well versed in it. Now, after years of study and searching, he had learnt much of magic, and not that hocus-pocus wand-waving that infests the public idea of magic, nor the even more foolish practice of calling upon spirits. He had gained knowledge of real magic, which was pure and deep and old. In fact, he kept 2 journals. One was a book of magic spells that had claimed this result or that, but failed miserably. The other book contained the magic he had found to be reliable. Of course, the book of fake spells was much larger than the one with his magic secrets. And unluckily for the Great Sardini, all of the spells that involved the making of gold from various types of substances were in the fake spell book. So as Sardini grew older, his fortunes began to dwindle. This is because a good deal of money when you are 14 and when you are 41 are 2 different things, especially when you have spent more than half of it and not worked a day in your life. Still, he was not without his resources, and he did what anyone who had dedicated 3 decades of research towards magic would do if they were in a tight spot. He began to tour England with a magic show. Of some of his most impressive possessions were what he called teleportation rings, which later he found out were called entry portals, a witch doctor's enchanted staff, which later he found out was just a carved branch of the turnbuckle tree. On top of this, he was able to procure for himself a sizable quantity of magic powder, a very effective additive to mystify just about anything, and a wonderful seasoning to various types of desserts with an almost vanilla-y, almondy flavour, which he later discovered was ground pixie. Now, the reason he came upon the true names of all of these items was not due at all to his own credit, but much rather to do with luck. For I have not told you of the Great Sardini's most prized possessions, a pair of imps which he caught while on expedition in Africa, a mother and son named Strumpet and Milksop. To understand why the imps were named Strumpet and Milksop, I should probably tell you a few things about imps. Now, in your mind, picture the nastiest, most ill-behaved little boy you can think of, with a mind always for stealing sweets and playing pranks. Some might say he was behaving impishly. But, try as he might, that little boy could not be as nasty or as naughty as a true imp, for it is in an imp's nature to do nothing else. They are constantly teasing and tricking and blaming and lying and fooling and taking more than their fair share. And so nasty are they that even when it comes to their own children, they cannot resist the urge to name them something truly awful, as their own private joke. To go along with their charming disposition, they are also quite short and fat with little useless wings and a greenish-grey complexion. For some reason only known to themselves, they prefer to spend the majority of their time nearly naked. This was often to the dismay of those around them, for if ever there was a creature that could be aided by a good set of clothes, it would be an imp. But an imp, believing that self-confidence is the key to being attractive, flaunts its pudgy, pale body for all to see, and would die before admitting to a single fault in it. This is quite ironic, because they are very quick to point out faults in others, especially other imps, but wholeheartedly deny their own. Female imps, however, have become fond of wearing large amounts of makeup, and in all honesty, due to their ugliness, Strumpet's makeup was the only way the great Sardini could tell her and Milksop apart. These two were his prized possessions because, coming from a magical world, they could explain magical items and their uses as easily as you could explain a toaster. But just as you have no idea of the toaster's inner workings, only that the thing is called a toaster and bread goes in and toast comes out, the imp's knowledge of magic was purely utilitarian. This was still much more magical knowledge than the great Sardini possessed, so he kept these two locked up in a pair of gilded bird cages, forcing them to tell him about his magical items and how to use them. Now, next to the wizards of old, the great Sardini was a hack and charlatan, relying on his two imps to explain to him all his magical spells, and furthermore, he did not give the proper respect to the powerful magic he was using. So, much like other men who have spent their lives chasing boyhood fantasies without a care for those around them, he grew up to be a rather selfish, narcissistic man. And so it was that the greatest magician on earth for the past 100 years was an utter failure. He knew nothing of the great spell workings, could not properly conjugate any of the 5 magical languages, nor possessed a single magic ring. And if the rest of this story was about the great Sardini and his life as a magician on Earth, this would be a very disappointing tale. But luckily for you, this story is not about the great Sardini and takes place far from Earth. Now you may ask, and quite rightly so, what is the point of talking about the great Sardini if the story is not about him? The truth of the matter is this: any time a person completely disappears off the face of the earth, it is a good habit to document the whether tos and why fors of the incident, so a proper historical record can be maintained. Also, I thought it would be wise to share with you the great Sardini's proclivities towards arrogance and selfishness, so you might not feel so bad when he received his comeuppance for practicing haphazard magic and for treating his imps, however nasty they were, so poorly.